G'day YouTube. Who's afraid of the deadly nerve gas? Who's afraid of the deadly nerve gas? Who's afraid of the deadly nerve gas? Early in the morning. Do you know much about nerve gas? What is the difference between tabun and sarin and soman? How does that compare with mustard gas, phosgene? What do you know about nerve gas? Well, this is the book to find out. Weapons of Tomorrow by Beckett, and it was written and published in 1982. So our today is his tomorrow. And so, on the condition of a no names, no pack drill arrangement, speaking from a secret location, let's see what the book has to say about Sarin, how it works, who cooked it up, and who might have sold it to the Syrians, because my personal opinion is that whoever sold it, whoever made a profit out of it, they really have the responsibility to go in and repossess it. Yeah? So, who sold the Sarin to the Syrians? Nerve gas originated in the insecticidal laboratories of the Wuppertal branch of IG Farben, where Dr. Gerhard Schrader first synthesised tabun, a highly toxic organophosphate. Tabun's military potential was recognised immediately. The gas was classified and taken over by the German army. By 1939, Schrader was experimenting with organophosphates containing fluorine and produced sarin, codenamed GB, which proved roughly 4 times as lethal as tabun. It was also quickly adopted by the German army, although the military never fully developed it. In 1944, Richard Kuhn synthesised soman, GD, the most toxic of the sarins. Known generally as the G agents, the sarin chemicals had been successfully synthesised by 1945 by the British laboratories at Porton Down, and the United States began to produce sarin in large quantities. Total American production of sarin is estimated at about 15,000 tonnes by 1957, at a cost of nearly $47 million, to give a unit cost of between $1 and $2 a pound. About a milligram of sarin may prove fatal if inhaled. It may also kill through penetration of the skin, but normally its rate of evaporation exceeds its rate of absorption. Sarin is highly volatile unless specially treated, and when it is so dispersed, it acts as a familiar riot gas, spreading out in a vaporous cloud. In its anti-personnel effects, nerve gas is directly comparable with kiloton range nuclear devices, and one of the standard explanations of the Soviet Union's build-up of chemical weapons in the early 1960s is based on the belief that the Kremlin was trying to find a counter to NATO's superiority in theatre nuclear weapons. Under ideal weather conditions, casualty-producing concentrations of sarin could drift more than 100 kilometres downwind. Thus, there are many circumstances where sarin and the other nerve gases might prove a greater hazard to civilians in the country being defended than they would to an invading Red Army well supplied with anti-gas equipment and thoroughly trained in its use. Sarin and the other major military nerve gases are chemically related to organophosphate insecticides such as malthion and parathion. Like these insecticides, the organophosphate nerve gases bind upon the vital enzyme acetylcholinesterase and inhibit neural transmissions by inactivating it. Death through asphyxia may follow within a minute of exposure to a large dose, and even small dosages may prove highly incapacitating, with death possibly following within a few minutes to an hour or so later. Symptoms are difficult breathing and then vomiting, muscle spasms, lack of control over bodily functions, possible paralysis, coma and death. Then it starts rabbiting on about efforts to secure an arms treaty. In the early 1950s, chemical companies including Britain's ICI and Bayer under Dr. Schrader's team, see the Pommies just captured a poison gas scientist, began working with organophosphate esters involving substituted 2-amino ethiols. Sorry, I never did chemistry. The result was Amaton VG, but previous experience with the G agents caused researchers to investigate the toxicities of certain analogues. This work produced the V agents of about a dozen. 3 became of immediate military interest. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Built the mosquito. Unlike Sarin, VX is non-volatile and highly persistent. So VX sticks around for a long time, but Sarin goes away. There are many compounds more lethal than VX or Sarin, for example, which were rejected because they were too unstable or for other reasons. A bit on rival capabilities. Credits America with approximately 38,000 tonnes of casualty anti-personnel agents, just under half being nerve gas and the remainder consisting of 3 types of older mustard gas. Of the nerve gas, about 75% is sarin and the rest is VX. About 65% of the mustard and 25% of the nerve gas are stored in bulk and the rest is inserted into a variety of munitions. Bombs, artillery shells, rocket warheads and landmines amounting to between 150,000 and 200,000 tonnes. As no new weapons have been purchased since 1969, a high percentage of the American stockpile is now obsolete, dangerously leaking or unserviceable, as at 1982. The actual figure is unknown, but as much as 40% has been suggested. British stocks of nerve gas officially amounted to only a few kilograms for research purposes. French stockpiles, most likely Sarin, probably amount to a few hundred tonnes. Okay, so French had a few hundred tonnes of the stuff. British claim they only had a few kilograms. The Americans had hundreds of thousands of tonnes of weapons ready to go. The Russians had 200,000 to 700,000 tonnes, depending on who's telling the story. There's a Soviet era, currently Russian, naval base on the Syrian coastline. So the Syrians were pretty good friends with the Soviets. The Air Force flies Soviet jet fighters, Soviet era jet fighters. They fly Soviet era helicopters. All their weapons tend to be Soviet. But the French were the ex-colonial masters and Syria was never actually quite part of the Warsaw Pact. So I would say that it's either the Russians or the French. Possibly the British, maybe even the Americans. But somebody sold the Sarin to the Syrians. And they should have to go in and get it back, in my opinion. We are hearing a lot about cruise missiles, Tomahawks, Slickums, sea-launched cruise missiles. They're pretty small, though. They might cost $1.5 million to fire each one of them, but they're only, a foot and a half in diameter. They can't deliver a huge amount of high explosive, and dropping high explosive on a strategic stockpile of nerve gas, some of which is going to be already in the shells or in the bombs. Here we see an extended range artillery shell for a binary type nerve gas where the 2 agents have to be physically mixed, and they mix in flight while the shell is spinning. Here we see an arrangement for an aerially delivered bomb to be dropped out of an aircraft or a drone, and it has a central container which opens up, dumps its contents into the outside part A, and then it spins like blazes to mix part A into part B. So by the time it hits, you've got yourself a nerve gas. Penetrating shaped charge for getting into a hardened bunker and filling it full of nerve gas. My point being, if you fire 1, 10, 50, 100 cruise missiles at, say, half a dozen stockpiles of nerve gas in various locations in Syria, if they're high explosive warheads on the Tomahawks, all you're going to do is damage some of the casings and vent it to the atmosphere, distribute it. If you go in there with incendiary charges, thermite, napalm, something like that, you're never going to reach the 1,000 degrees or 1,500 degrees Celsius plus temperature necessary to safely burn, decompose a complex organophosphate poison. So what you'll do is turn some of it into dioxin and propel the rest of it into the atmosphere, and you're going to have a big air plume of toxic poisonous shit. In order to send a Tomahawk cruise missile after a strategic stockpile of sarin in Syria and have any chance of actually incinerating the nerve gas, you'd have to have about a Hiroshima-sized nuclear tip. And I'm sure that, you know, they have Tomahawks that have got 20 and 50 and 100 kiloton warheads. So the only scenario I can see for incinerating the sarin in Syria would be to launch 2 or 3 dozen Tomahawks, all a mixture of incendiary and high explosive, and have some scurvy sea dog, some silly swabby, accidentally mix a nuclear tipped Tomahawk into the firing order. By mistake. Oops, shit, didn't mean to drop a fireball on your nerve gas. But by gee, wouldn't that send a message to all the third world countries that have got fertiliser factories and pesticide factories and might think about building themselves a few nerve gases. Just a thought. Here we see how much of the stuff you actually need, right? Kilograms required per square kilometres to get 50% casualties. And there's sarin. You've got 2 different readings. About 90 kilograms if you've got light air in early morning or late evening, 15 degrees Celsius, or calm night, minus 20 degrees to plus 15 degrees Celsius. Right? To kill half the people in a square kilometre, you only need 90 kilograms of it delivered. If you've got sarin 15 degrees Celsius and a fresh breeze any time of the day, you're going to need 10 times that amount. You're going to need, 1,100 kilograms. Right? You're going to have to put about a tonne in there. I understand the attack in Syria was when it was pretty cool. So we're down around here. So it's well within the range of an artillery barrage, rocket-propelled shells, whatever. I don't know what the actual incentive would be for the Assad regime to have used gas on its own civilians, even though there were rebels in the area, because surely they've got enough intelligence to understand that the reaction of the world to using poison gas on your own citizens is going to be crackers. But it's really hard to imagine hard-pressed rebels who are fighting to stay in the building being able to come up with the resources to lob hundreds of kilograms of poison gas through artillery tubes or rocket launchers into the suburbs of a city when they're supposedly losing. I just can't see them doing it. Granted, if they've captured all that stuff from the authorities and the authorities have been keeping it quiet, the rebels have captured, like an entirely intact chemical warfare unit, then maybe they're in a position to do it. But my point is, there's nothing you can do from the outside with Tomahawks that's going to do anything except make it a whole lot worse. And the only thing you could do, even if you knew exactly where all the sarin was stored, would be to nuke the shit. Because that's the only way a Tomahawk can carry enough destructiveness to get rid of a nerve gas stockpile. Some silly bugger sitting under a tree somewhere with a message to YouTube. Ciao.